But it does raise, and I don't have the answer to this question, and I hope I don't ever pretend that I do, but it does raise questions about the behavior of some of the people in the crowd who were instigating others to break the law, and who weren't arrested. And, given our facial recognition software capabilities, hard to believe they can't be found. And I would specifically cite a man called Ray Epps, who's now a hero on the left and funded by the Democratic Party, et cetera. But take the politics out of it. What is that? Here you have a guy on camera repeatedly saying, we're going into the Capitol.
We need to go into the Capitol. Into the Capitol.
And he's not in jail when people who didn't go into the Capitol are in jail? What do you make of that?
Again, that's something I actually address in the book. It's funny, there's a lot in here. So my concern with that, and I look at it from a chief of police point of view, is you have somebody that's down, and I believe he's right near the old executive office building on the 5th, the day before January 6th, talking to a group of people, talking about, we have to get into the building, we have to get in the building. And then the next day to see him at what's called the Pennsylvania Avenue Gate. It's one of the two fence lines I had down at the West Front. And he's there, and he clearly sees the banner, the metal crowd control barriers that are up with the signs saying restricted, So he knows that's a restricted area. And he's up there, and you see him lean in, and he whispers in somebody's ear, and he covers his mouth in such a way so you can't read his lips or anything. Whispers in somebody's ear, and that person moments later is attacking my officers. That's suspicious as hell to me. It raised a lot of concerns.
What is that?
And what's interesting is I believe...
and that's verified. The person into whose ear he whispered...
Yeah, I think if you watch the video, you see that, and that person immediately go and start pulling on the gate and start fighting with the officers. And what's interesting is I believe he went on 60 Minutes. And on 60 Minutes, what he said was he went up to the officer and he told that officer, these officers are on our side. Don't hurt these officers. I believe that was pretty much not verbatim. But don't hurt these officers, they're on our side. Don't hurt these officers. Well, if that's the case, why would you cover your mouth and not yell it to everybody? Because it didn't seem like that protester was the only one that was possibly going to be hurting the officers. You had a whole bunch of people next to him. Why wouldn't he tell it to the whole group?
I don't know. I know that Epps is being encouraged by partisan Democrats to sue people who raise these questions, but they're fair questions, and I'm going to raise them anyway. How, given that tape, could the January 6th committee defend Ray Epps, which they did? Doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I'm having trouble answering that one. I don't know.
Interesting. How many how many federal agents, officers, assets, people connected with federal agencies do you think were in the crowd? Do we have any idea?
I really have no idea.
More or fewer than normal, would you say?
Well, if you have, again, going back to what I'm reading now in the GAO report with 19 domestic terrorists possibly coming in, I've never seen anything like that in Washington, D.C., so you may have a larger than usual presence.
Amazing. Who's Yogananda Pittman?
Yogananda Pittman was my assistant chief for intelligence and security.
Okay. So did she have the intelligence that you didn't have?
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know?
I don't know. You don't know what you don't know. I don't know.
Good point.
I don't know what she had and what she didn't have, but I do know that when you look at it, and we immediately knew. I mean, anybody immediately knew. One of the first things you start thinking about is this an intelligence failure? So think about it. We go through January 6th. I was begging for the National Guard, refused before, refused during it. We get the Capitol under control. I get them to where they can go back into session. 7:30, they elect to go in at 8, and then the House goes in at 9. But nonetheless, so think about this. The very next day, less than 24 hours after we got control of the Capitol, Nancy Pelosi goes on national TV, blames the leadership at the top of Capitol Police, calls for my resignation on national TV, and then lies about me. Okay? The very next day, puts Yogananda Pittman as acting chief.
But Yogananda Pittman, you just described her as the head of intelligence for Capitol Police.
Correct.
So if there was an intelligence failure, which again doesn't seem like a failure, it seems very intentional to me, but if there was such a failure, she'd be responsible, correct? Or she'd be in the chain of responsibility anyway.
Well, I mean, she was the head of intelligence. So if there's an intelligence failure, my thing is, do a proper analysis. Why do a knee-jerk reaction? I mean, putting her in charge, she ended up getting a vote of no confidence. so she didn't get the position from the police officers because many were upset with what happened.
Where did she wind up?
Where is she now?
Yeah.
She's chief of police for the University of California, Berkeley.
Interesting. So right across from Nancy Pelosi's district.
That is correct,
in the
sir.
Bay Area.
That is correct.
So you just kind of take the Bay Bridge over there, and that's where she is now. What does that position pay? Do you know?
I think it pays pretty well. There was,
Pays extraordinarily well.
I'm sure it pays. I'm sure it pays pretty good. It's interesting. There was a hearing just recently that was on TV. You can look at it, where the chief of police, Tom Manger, was asked about her position. It turns out that she was given some type of a secret leave so she could start her job on February 1st as the chief of police and not retire from the Capitol Police for months later.
Oh, so you should get the benefits.
Yeah, think about that. Yeah. It appears to be against departmental policy. And nobody allegedly was told.
What you're saying is that the head of intelligence for the Capitol Police, which demonstrably didn't have the intelligence it needed to protect the building, that person was first elevated to acting chief of Capitol Police and then given a very high-paying job right across from Nancy Pelosi's district at the University of California, Berkeley.
That is correct. And I will say this.
So that looks like a reward to me.
Well, I do know that the unit had significant intelligence. And I know many people within the unit were pushing that intelligence up to the leadership of the unit. So I do know that. Many of them became whistleblowers, and many of them were punished and forced to resign. Yep.
This looks like a scam.
I mean,
just saying.
It just gets more convoluted. I feel so bad for the men and women in the police department, what they went through. I feel so bad for the intelligence analysts and what they went through. Many of them, it was really, really bad. I feel bad for the officials that were either demoted, forced to resign over this, forced to retire early. There's a lot of people that need someone. I think an outside entity needs to come in and do some investigation about what went on with some.
We've had many entities doing investigations. Yeah. I believe we impaneled this committee or commission, this body of members of Congress that went on for about a year and was on the news every single night. Did they address any of these questions?
No, sir.
How could you have a January 6th commission whose job it is to figure out what happened on January 6th, not get to the bottom of why the head of intelligence at Capitol Police didn't pass on the intelligence, why the chief of Capitol Police was kept in the dark and denied support from the U.S. military, why Yogananda Pittman wound up, after failing on January 6th, getting a high-paying job right across from Nancy Pelosi's district? Who wouldn't ask these questions?
Yeah, well, I know there's people on the Hill still trying to ask those questions, and hopefully they can get answers. But it looks like they keep running into roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. But it's hard to believe 2.5 years later, we're still at this point. I still think somebody along the line is going to find, the smoking gun, the missing puzzle piece, and put this together. But it does. When you look at it, and there's still so much more to it, it just begins to raise more and more questions.
It's interesting to talk to you because, this is just my assessment, but you seem like a very straight arrow guy.
I try.
Well, it comes off you in waves. So, and I mean that as a compliment, but how long did it take you to realize there's something very strange going on here?
I knew there was something strange going on pretty soon. When I was running into the issues with them not wanting me to testify, I was like, this starts getting a little weird. And then when I started sitting down and talking to officers and getting information, then finding out from some of the intelligence that was out there and where it was, and seeing some of the emails of the intelligence analysts pushing it up to their officials, I knew something was fishy. I mean, think about it. How can somebody not look at all this and think something's odd?
So, I mean, we have a media whose job it is to get to the bottom of questions like these, or at least to ask the questions of knowledgeable people with relevant experience, and you're at the top of that list. We interviewed you, never aired, at a previous job, but how many other long interviews have you done with media outlets?
Long ones, not very many. I actually can't think of any. I've done 60 minutes. That's probably about the longest.
And how long, from your 60 minutes interview, how much of your account wound up on television, do you think? Estimate.
3 or 4 minutes.
3 or 4 minutes. 3 or 4 minutes. So you're the chief of Capitol Police on January 6th. Common sense suggests you'd be the first person that any reporter trying to figure out what happened on January 6th would call.
You'd think.
Is your cell phone buzzing day and night from
No.
curious reporters trying to find the truth?
No, it's calmed down. I mean, the first couple of days were something else, but it's really calmed down. And I'm not stupid when it comes to law enforcement. I've been in law enforcement for 30 years. I've done everything from capturing homicide suspects to doing barricade situations. This didn't have to happen. This was screwed up from the get-go. Didn't have to happen. Numerous opportunities to prevent it from happening. Numerous opportunities from preventing my men and women from going through what they had to, and it never happened. There was never that opportunity to stop that train.
There's always a concern that politics will infect law enforcement and the justice system more broadly. And I think you've thought about this. It's one of the reasons I think you said we need to be strictly apolitical in the way we administer law enforcement. It does seem like things have changed. And it does seem like politics affect the way we enforce the law. Does it feel that way to you?
Yeah, and again, that's one of the things that many things that are in here. I talk about the 2020 riots versus the January 6th attack.
The riots in front of the White House where famously St. John's Church was set on fire.
Oh, White House, across the country. I talk about the White House, and I talk about an agency that was formed by Congress specifically for the protection of the United States president, the Washington, D.C. Police Department. The White House is under attack, and they are prevented. They are prevented. I know it's not from Chief Newsom. It's from his, he was the chief at the time. It would have been from above him. They're prevented from going on White House grounds and helping the United States Secret Service with defending the White House. So think about that.
Who made that decision?
Again, all I know is, Newsom's hands were tied. So Mayor Bowser, higher? I don't know. But think about that.
But somebody told there was real rioting. In fact, I think that more officers were injured at that riot than were injured on January 6th, I think.
Yep. Again, don't take my word. GAO report. More officers injured at the protests up by the White House than on January 6th. And I'm told by Park Police, all charges were dropped, according to the fighting at Lafayette Park and at the White House. There were Secret Service agents bloodied and battered over there. There was a number of federal agencies that were hurt. Structures set on fire. They tried to light the Hay Adams Hotel on fire that was occupied. Think about that. Charges dropped. No such situation. I mean, when you look at the disparity of how justice is being applied, again, that's scary. That becomes really scary when it becomes politicized like that, and that's what appears to have happened.
I mean, it sounds like Trump is the key to all of this. If Trump hadn't been the president, things would have been responses would have been very different, don't you think? I mean, if Barack Obama had been president, do you think that someone would have told MPD, the Washington, D.C. Police Department, they couldn't protect the White House?
Again, I protect the White House. I see what you're saying there. I don't know. I mean, I think not.
Look, I mean, it's a hypothetical. I shouldn't ask you to answer hypothetical questions, but it seems a little amazing. Last question, and thank you for doing this again. I really appreciate it. I think this is important, and I hope that everyone who's interested in January 6th and its aftermath, which really has changed the country, will watch this interview. But looking back after spending your entire life in law enforcement, how have your views changed after January 6th?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, my views of law enforcement, I still think law enforcement is a very honorable profession. I really, really do. I think it's being screwed up in a lot of cities. I feel bad for a lot of people that are going into it. We need good cops. But right now their hands are being tied. When you look at what law enforcement's going on, I mean, I was just talking with somebody who, one of their officers in Washington, D.C. arrested somebody who went to a scene of a robbery, recovered a weapon, recovered somebody else's wallet in possession with the suspect, made the arrest, papered a gun, went in the person's pocket, and during the search found a loaded handgun, went down to papers, no paper. No paper, armed robbery. Means all charges were dropped. That's bad. That's bad when we're seeing the type of crime that we're seeing in some of these cities and they're not prosecuting some of these cases. I feel sorry for the officers. It's very dangerous for them. I still love the profession, still love the officers with the Capitol Police, Washington, D.C. Police, still talk to them regularly. They're going through a lot, and I just don't think they're getting the backing they need.
No, they're not. And the effects on the rest of us are
we're seeing it.
Stephen Sund, former chief of Capitol Police, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me on,
Appreciate
sir.
it.